Talk to Me Tuesday. Welcome to Talk to Me Tuesday on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Mari B. And today we're going to have a really special show. We're going to have an open line of communication and have a really transparent conversation about what happened last week. So last week, there were a series of unfortunate events that happened at our nation's capital. This news has been heartbreaking, watching protesters attack our nation's Capitol building. Many rioters forced their way in and just disrespecting the law. Being violent and destructive is not the answer, and these Americans did not represent our democracy or our country. Today, we'll be having a healthy conversation about what this means and how we need to do better. Our show today will be focusing on our guest's opinion on the situation, and I would love to introduce to you today our managing partner of D. Miller & Associates, Attorney Ramesh Raghuthaman. Welcome.
Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Yes, it's such a pleasure to have you today. And I know today is going to be a very important show. You know, we love to have on the show panels and guests that are not afraid to give their opinion, their feel. That way we can also educate and help people in a positive manner that's out there. But these healthy conversations are much needed in our nation. And I think we started doing this in 2020 with social injustice.
Absolutely. And I think one of the great things about what we do is that, look, we absolutely encourage discussion. When we say open discussion, we mean discussion on both sides. If you disagree with us, you disagree with us. Or if you disagree with an opinion, you disagree with it. But that's the point of healthy and healthy debate and open conversation. So I think we do a good job of that. When it comes to these kind of topics. And these topics are very divisive. They're divisive. They're divisive inherently. And, I think with everything that's been going on and everybody, the one thing that I've noticed in today's society, for the most part, we all have a platform if we want it. And I think, it creates this kind of echo chamber for whatever side you're on. And I think that's why there's so much of it. And there's a lot more discussion and there's a lot more out there. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. And I love that you said that. You guys have a platform and you choose how you want to use your voice and how you want to exercise it. I know we choose to exercise it by a healthy debate, just like you mentioned, but that at the same token, for us to bring it to the forefront and being inside your home on your phone and being able to talk about it. So now I want to go ahead and open up this conversation and, asking you, Attorney Ramesh, do you remember, this happened last week, so it's super, super fresh. What were you doing or where were you when you heard about the riots that were happening at our nation's capital?
I was actually sitting right here, exactly where I am right now, when I heard about it. And, honestly, when we're here and we're working, we're pretty focused. We're primarily focused on doing the business that we have to do for our clients and making sure that our clients get what they need from us, both on the service side and on the legal side. So we get, you get kind of buried into, kind of our own ecosystem. It's kind of our own culture here. So I wasn't really kind of aware of really kind of what was going on until a little bit later in the afternoon, towards the end of the day, when I was in shock. I can't believe it. Here's the first thing that stood out for me. So in 97, I was a Washington, the DC internship program fellow. It was something that I was accepted into my junior year of college, and I got to live in DC for 6 months, and I worked on the Hill. And because I grew up in Sugar Land, obviously Tom DeLay was our congressman, and he was a Republican. So I was actually stationed at the House Republican Conference, and I was there during the time when it was 97. So it was like Newt Gingrich and Tom DeLay and all the kind of the old guard, right? Trent Lott and all of those guys, the old leadership. And let me say this. I worked for the House Republican Conference. I worked for the leadership of the party, and I could not get onto the floor if my life depended on it. You know, I could not get into the Senate floor if my life depended on it. I mean, you have a pass you have to give to a guard before you get in. You have to wear that pass while you're in there. As soon as you walk out, you give that back. You're literally only in there. Like, I used to write for this magazine, so we used to deliver the magazine out. So that's why I would be in there. And the fact that they were able to breach and come in, it was something that was really shocking. But I want to start with something really positive. And, you know, I know when you look back at the events and you say to yourself, man, that was terrible. That was negative. But the one thing that I really, you know, liked, and I felt like, you know, it was kind of a result of some of the movement from 2020, was the initial response from everyone was, hey, if those guys were different, the outcome would have been different. And that was, our president-elect said that. Our other leaders said that. Local leaders said that. And the fact that that was the conversation from the outset, I think that that was a good thing, because we used to not talk about that before. You know, we did not talk about how different, the disparity in treatment. Obviously, with local policemen we have, but this was on its whole other level.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, there's a lot of people also with what you just said that are angry, that just even climbing the wall would have been maced in their eyes or, you know, beaten down. So, you know, the opinion is very intense around. And I agree. I think it's great that, you know, we're opening up these wounds and these conversations so people can recognize that it's a different treatment. It's also a different outcome as well. I want to kind of talk about those things in treatment and outcome, because some of the outcomes, you know, on other situations, multiples were arrested. Here, you know, they were not let in, but it was a little bit easier than what we anticipated. And it's very hard to watch. And I know how it made me feel that Congress was at risk. There was people, like, there's a lot of videos that you guys can find anywhere that they were fearing for their lives. And so, you know, I can't even imagine what that feels like, being inside and being, you know, in the Senate, House of Representatives, all that good stuff. What is your feeling on, you know, knowing that Congress was at risk, and you know what, still is at risk, because we don't know what tomorrow brings?
Mari, you make up a great point. I mean, let's be real. Let's put that in context. They were in the middle of a constitutional event. Okay. That is an event that they were doing the nation's business. They were doing what the will of the people showed. And for this to happen during this type of event, I mean, there's just so many questions you can ask from all over. But, you know, I do find it also interesting, because I think you need to mention this point. I mean, these guys were armed. I think the one picture that really stood out to me was the guy in the House of Representatives with the professional zip ties. I mean, like, this is a guy who got up that morning, dressed like a vandal, went and got professional zip ties, and then took it, packed it, put it in his car or whatever, brought it with him. And what were you going to do? You going to tie people up?
Right.
I mean, what was that? I mean, he had like a whole supply, you know, and I think it just is a snapshot of some of the mentality of kind of, I can't believe that we're here. Like, what were they expecting to happen? And I'm not sure, but, you know, the conversations I've been having with colleagues and friends alike is, you know, any other group, man, they wouldn't have even gotten close to the door. I mean, there's no way. I don't even
Yeah.
know. Like, how do
And
you
I
get
agree
that
with you.
close? I mean, during session. I mean, they were in session.
Yeah. And talking about that, look at all the facts that you just presented right now, having equipment or supplies to execute a plan, going on there and, tampering with a building that's under high security. None of that, if you are viewed in a certain way, not really depicting on a certain race, but just viewed in a certain way, that automatically will probably put a gunshot to your back.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
We want to talk about these conversations and we want to fight that it's not right because, we have to look at the scenarios. And if it was presented in a different manner or at a different rally, I'm sure the outcome would be totally different.
Completely different.
Yeah. And before we get to that, very controversial part of our conversation, which I know we're going to, hit it home and on that, let's talk about how words have power. Okay. I really want to bring this up because there was a rally that was held by our current president and him inciting the crowd with only words that lead to one of the worst events to our nation. Mm-hmm. Words have power, guys, not just through the TV, through your social media. I really strongly suggest that we do research before reacting to certain choices of words. So this is kind of what led to that. And so let's talk a little bit about that, Ramesh.
Yeah, I think, the president's, his speech was, something, it was inciting. And yeah, words are extremely powerful. And, not to mention, you multiply that with herd mentality. And, the other problem when you have reactionary, kind of assembly, kind of after the president speaks, they're kind of in reactionary mode. And, the problem with that is herd mentality is real low effort thinking. And I think what happens is you have a bunch of people who, once that low effort kind of group think kind of sets in place, herd mentality kind of can take over. And I think we saw that. I mean, any type of quick review into some of the past social media, they said they were coming there. They said they were going to march. And they said, but the interesting thing is there really was no plan. I mean, I don't know how many of the interviews or things that you've seen, they didn't have a plan. They talked to the people down there. They didn't have a plan. They were just going down there
They're just going.
Yeah, just to mess stuff up. But I will say this, the outcry and the public reaction to what can only be deemed as a, systematic, failure. To the point of, you could argue almost negligence in the sense of protecting what was going on that day. These guys, when I immediately lost my train of thought right there, but what I'm saying is, when these guys are all together with that herd mentality, I think it proliferates, and and then it becomes a mob, and that's what ended up happening. But like I said, the reaction has been amazing. The public outcry has forced people to act. I mean, the FBI's got 40 guys on the wanted list. I don't know if you saw, but anybody identified so far was not allowed to fly back home from DC. So, but stop and think for a minute. People flew in from all over the country to go storm the Capitol.
All over. Yes, you're totally right. And look, we, especially D. Miller & Associates, all the entities that, you are a part of, Ramesh, we support the right to peacefully protest. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think this last year has showed us that, certain things we are surprised, but how they're escalating is probably what the surprise factor is, because we peacefully protest. However, it should never revert to violence. It should never revert to breaking the law, to be negligent, to even tampering with people's lives that are trying to do the well of, this nation. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. I mean, like you said, that herd mentality, I feel like it escalated really quickly to it not being a peaceful protest. And it went.
I mean, the fact that the Speaker of the House lost her podium, I was waiting for that to end up on eBay. But the Speaker of the House podium, I mean, they were standing on statues. The old Tip O'Neill, the old Speaker of the House, they were standing on statues. Which is interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up, because if you guys remember back a couple of years ago in 2018, when there was, a movement, right or wrong, to take down certain statues and certain, iconic images and stuff of old, Confederate leaders or Union leaders or what, anything of that ilk. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a law, and President Trump actually spoke about this. And in that speech, he stated, anytime you destroy or you desecrate or you vandalize U.S. federal property, there is a 10-year minimum prison sentence. So all of those guys who took a hammer to the Capitol or broke a window or stood on a historic artifact or tried to move a painting or do all of those things, it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be
and you know what? Speaking about that, I hope, whoever is in charge of the legal action, that they do the right thing, no matter who is presented in front of them or what they look like or what they sound like. Now, that was actually leading to my next question, is your opinion of the legal action that needs to happen for these crimes. I mean, we're talking here, Congress, okay? We're not just talking any, vandalizing is wrong, but we're talking the top of the top here. So what do you, in your opinion, needs to happen for these crimes, including but not limited to destroying property, breaking windows, and harming law enforcement, like beating them to death is what we're talking about here. So give us what your opinion on the legal action.
Well, I think there's a number of things. I think there's a number of things that you can look into. I mean, obviously, you had more than one person, so we could look into conspiracy. You can look into any type of mob, inciting a mob or public decency statute or ordinance. But definitely on a federal level, there are federal ordinances and statutes that need to be enforced. And if you're going to hold certain parts of history and say that these rules apply only here, but now when it happens over here, you don't want to apply the same rules, well, that's not going to work. And look, what those guys did was vandalism. What those guys did was terrorism. What those guys did was an insurrection. What they did was criminal, okay? Mm-hmm. And what they did, look, the people that interrupted the session, you guys are, those guys are traitors, man. I mean, you interrupted a constitutional event, okay? Mm-hmm. And, I understand that there's a belief from a number of people that somehow this, this whole election was stolen and things were not on the, on the straight and narrow or up and up. And to that, here's what I'll say. That's hogwash, because look, every election has been handled through time pretty much the same way. We have procedural safeguards that come into place after each election. I think, everybody learned a huge lesson after the 2000 Bush-Gore recount in Florida with the voting machines and the indentions and the chads and the dimple chads and intent of the voter and all of that. And we learned that. So, and now the machines are, have addressed that, and, we don't have that type of issue. But for you, one of the things I really learned during the whole election and post-election was, during election fraud, if you want to assert election fraud, if you want to assert that an election was run fraudulently, that requires real-time evidence at the time of the election or during the election. You need real-time affidavits. You need real-time witnesses and testimony. You need to file your paperwork. You need to ask for, injunctive. You do all of those things at the time. You don't wait for the results and then 2 weeks later go back and then try to find the fraud. Because look, here's the bottom line. Can we find anecdotal instances of one ballot being counted where it shouldn't have, or one guy getting a vote that meant for another guy? I'm sure. But does it amount to 300,000 in a state that's going to turn the state, or 12,000? No, it doesn't. Yeah. And, even the Republican lawmakers now are coming and saying that they agree that these claims were baseless. Because, the election happened in November. We still have not seen one thing of proof. We haven't seen any.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to jump on that with you is, again, we go back to words have power. And if you don't either know or research exactly, you went to law school, Ramesh, you have a lot of, experience in this field on knowing a little bit how it works on the evidence and the filings and stuff like that. But for those that don't know, they do rely on what now we have is social media and the news outlets, which words have power. So I do strongly suggest, if you guys are watching, to do your proper research. And that goes for everything, not just this topic, any topic going forward. Don't really just see what is on the platforms and run with it. Do your own research, because the words may not be the right words, but they do have power.
And it's interesting because now, I don't know, but the debate and topic around this whole thing now is all about free speech, right? Because what happened after the riot or the insurrection is that you have the social media platforms taking a hard look at their own platform and their guidelines, and realizing that, hey, look, even if he is the president, unfortunately, he has violated these guidelines, and they've decided that within their rights to not let him use it or not allow him to do it. And, I know there was another platform recently called Parler that's been around, for maybe a year or so. I don't really know. But anyway, it's and it turned into, another platform for like-minded folks to go to and do their thing. And, all of the hosting companies like Amazon and Apple and all of these other places have taken them off. And now you are not going to be able to get on Parler and some of these other ones that, are not promoting within the community standards. How about I say that?
Yeah, that's a safe way to put it that way. And I kind of want to touch base on what, you're bringing up, which I think is extremely important. Within this situation and the rioters, people have lost their jobs. Now, we're in the era where things go viral. You have pictures and you have videos. There's a lot of evidence, and it's really easy to get a hold of, whether it's your family, your employers, or anybody that knows you, right? So people are losing their jobs and are being searched by, the police and even the FBI, right? What are your thoughts on this? Because, it's going viral in a platform. And then, this kind of goes into the freedom of speech and the freedom of their rights and all that good stuff. So, there are a few that are like, I regret going. And there's a few others that say, I'll do it again. So what are your thoughts on, this section of it?
Well, like every, red-blooded American, I believe in my First Amendment rights and free speech. But that also doesn't mean that I'm going to walk into a crowded movie theater and scream fire, okay? There are limits to free speech, okay? Yes, you have the freedom of speech, but understand the spirit and the context of that, okay? There is a moral responsibility. You have a responsibility to your community. There's a context in which free speech is written. Okay. Now, what these guys were doing was not free speech. Okay. There's a line. There's a clear demarcation. Had they just stayed at the rally and protested there and done their thing, that's free speech. But what these guys did was criminal. And my opinion on all of them who committed crimes, because I don't want to say all of them. There was a guy who was out there who stayed at the rally and stayed outside and, didn't break the law. I don't want to group them into that, but the people that interrupted and broke in during a congressional event, when Congress was in session, during a constitutional event, when they know that this is important business for the nation, they stopped it. They walked in there. They destroyed property. They'd go to jail here. If they did that in Sugar Land, they'd go to jail. They need to go to jail for what they did. And I'm glad to see that the airlines are not allowing them to fly home. I'm glad to see that I'm glad to see people fighting back with that, because, free speech and those kind of, things. Yes, nobody's trying to take your free speech away, but what we're asking you to do is be responsible. Nobody's saying you can't say anything or can't do this, but there are norms, there's codes of conduct, there's understandings, and you got to follow those things, and you got to do the right thing. That's what our community was based on,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, look, if we can be part of the solution, which there are many people in a positive light that are being part of the solution, and they're standing on their own 2 feet on their opinion, I think that is what it is about. Now, rumor has it that some members of Congress are speculating that this could have been an inside job. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Attorney Ramesh, of, it just seemed too easy to enter, right? It seemed to, not much of a fight. And maybe they did, maybe it was countless hours. But I just want to kind of get your opinion, of course, of, based upon the facts that you know.
So from what I understand, I mean, I can see how one could kind of come to that conclusion or thought. But what I would say is this: I think that, I don't want to say it was an inside job, but I think that knowing what everybody knew ahead of the event, I think where it became an inside job is, kind of the day before, they were woefully understaffed and they were woefully unprepared. This is post 9/11 America too. So that was also shocking, right? You would anticipate after 9/11, things changed, like our life changed. And I was surprised to see that, this is post 9/11 and you were allowed to. And again, I have first person experience of being down there. I know you cannot move around freely in the Capitol, the Senate building, or the House.
Right.
You can't. You cannot. I mean, you can't. And it amazes me how they got where they got, and as many of them did. But again, when things are happening like that in real time and riots, and and I saw the videos of the police, like, I thought to myself, what am I going to do? What would I do? I mean, you've got like 250 people, one of them dressed like Chewbacca, coming in and trying to storm, and God knows what they're going to do. But, the sad part about it is these guys are supporters of the president or his party or his policies. And, the funny thing that happened after all of that, he lost 5 voters because unfortunately people passed. And all of these people who are his supporters are now going to get charged with felonies, or never going to be able to get to vote again. Never going to be able to carry a gun, never going to be able to participate in the government. So it's kind of funny, they consider themselves patriots, and I think for me on a personal level, look, I hope that what I say, I don't mean it to offend anybody, but when I hear that word patriot and I hear some of the language and the viewpoints that, hey, would be directed at someone like me. Okay. Well, you know what? This is something, and like it bothers me. It hurts me as an American. It hurts me. Mm-hmm. I was born in Youngstown, Ohio. I've lived here my whole life. I have 1 passport. I speak 1 language. Not very well, but I speak English. I pay taxes. I contribute to our society. I give to charitable causes, and we employ people here at this firm. Tell me, that's being a patriot. Mm-hmm. What Darren and I and us in this firm, and what we do when we give back to the community, what we do when we employ people, what we do when we get behind causes, that's what being a patriot is. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with, completely on either side. I don't think there's anybody who agrees with completely one side or the other, but we have a responsibility to be Americans. And, it's fundamentally something that really, I don't know. It's the one thing I would say out of this whole big divide that really upsets me on a personal level. But,
Right.
The loss of life is unacceptable. The violence is unacceptable. And look, let's be fair. That applies to both sides. Okay. The violence is unacceptable on both ends, right? Peaceful protest means peaceful protest. With people are getting shot and things are being broken, that's not peaceful, know. And our society gives us an amazing right and it allows us to protest, and we should not confuse that with what that means.
And I appreciate you sharing, your honest opinion and feeling from being, an American, law-abiding American and citizen as well. I think that's important to hear your opinion, as I'm pretty sure there's many that feel the same way on how they contribute to this nation. Now, speaking about reactions, I know you just mentioned it's both sides, right? The rioting side, the peaceful side, and of course the officers. And I will say there are some things that went viral that I don't think is of character of a law enforcement, meaning taking selfie pictures
exactly
with the rioters, or viral videos of them taking certain hats and putting a message across their face when they're in uniform. And I don't know if you guys know, but those law enforcement, firefighters, Army, Marines, etc., when you have the uniform on, you respect it to the fullest. And I think that character and that reaction also applies on the law enforcement side as well. And hopefully, I know they're under certain investigation. I know they're kind of doing their protocol, and I appreciate that. But I kind of want to highlight that you said that it's not just one-sided, it's both sides.
Yeah, it's all of us. And, I think that it's really upsetting. And, what's even more frightening and scary is what apparently is supposed to be coming up, right? So I think the 17th has been another date that's been out there. I think people, it's been out on the news to be careful about. I read yesterday about a number of different plots, where people were going to storm all 50 U.S. capitals on Inauguration Day. So again, I hope that's not the case. I hope that we can figure out a way to start the ball moving towards constructive resolution, right? Because Marty, we did our panel discussion, January or February or March, early part of 2020, right? When it was right after George Floyd, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. I mean, maybe, fortunately we haven't seen or heard of any more police incidents, but we're hearing about all of this now. And I'm not saying one is worse or better or whatever, but I mean, it's not ending. I was hoping, we would be making progress from all of that, but.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of, mention, what the solution is to this division that is happening. I know these healthy conversations is part of it. It's not the full solution. I know it's not going to happen overnight. And I know the reaction we've gotten in this instance has been, a light at the end of the tunnel, but it has to be all of us. And I don't want to say all law enforcement is wrong, because it's only certain members. For those that are watching, we do have friends that were even on panels that were here representing that side that, do the right thing for our citizens. But just those, even from the arrests, Ramesh, there was 100 arrests in this rioting, which I don't know if you remember, go back to summer of 2020, Black Lives Matter. That was a nationwide effect. There was way more arrests than that.
Oh, yeah.
So we definitely need to keep in mind of those things and keep exercising. I know a lot of people that are watching or hearing this are getting tired of it, to where it's like, oh, another thing, or enough's enough. But we can't give up. We got to keep going strong, because it's not going to change overnight. So we have to do our part on that solution. And we may not know what the solution is, but we have to try our best to come up with some type of solution to get to that better, standing for our nation.
No, I think you hit it right on the head. I think, Mari, one thing I'm really happy about it, this is a responsibility. We take our social responsibility serious, and it's something that we're really proud of, and we're going to continue to do. It's just, you're right. There is a part of it where you're tired of hearing it, but it almost, and this is even worse, is that it's almost become the norm a little bit.
Yeah.
You look at stuff on your phone or read stuff, and you're just not even really surprised anymore. And as a society, I don't want to get to a place like that.
Yes, and I know we're going to actually talk about that, which is more of the mental health side, okay? Because that's where you now start becoming numb to things that are just not right. And it shouldn't be normal for us to get numb to that, right? But we do have a few comments. We have Maria saying, I hope we can have a peaceful transition of power. Violence is never the answer, which I agree. I know we're talking about the 17th, which is this Sunday coming up. And then Mary Lou said, we must find harmony. Totally agree. I think
absolutely MLP.
Yeah. And as a society, we definitely need to find that. Now, I want to talk about social media a little bit. I know this is a very, tough topic in regards to what has happened, but there is power in social media. Now there's power to where they're shutting and suspending down accounts. Okay. Not just that, there's power on, in my opinion, manipulation of what you see, what you read, and that mental warp zone that we are allowing either ourselves, our kids, our future to get into is very toxic
and scary. Yeah, and you run the risk of how do you kind of titrate the the kind of the guidelines, or the boundaries for which you want to play in. But at the end of the day, I think it all comes back to the responsibility, I guess, falls on us, right? So look, social media, it's so interesting. I have a Facebook. I don't get on fights with anybody. I use Facebook to connect with people I went to school with 35 years ago and see family and all of that. I feel like I use social media for its intended purpose, right? And it's sad that anytime you have something like that, there is a segment of it that will morph into, a more confrontational style. And I don't think that is what this was intended to do, right? I mean, I think social media had a pretty like organic kind of purpose when it started, right? And I think unfortunately that's all gotten lost with the abilities that have kind of morphed over time with what social media has been able to be used for.
So. Yeah, and look, just kind of piggybacking off of that, I know social media tends to be influential. It could be dangerous because some people tend to follow trends, tend to follow what is being said, sharing pictures. But then you bringing up a good point. People also have a strong confrontational voice sometimes too. Healthy conversation, I welcome it. It's the confrontation, but it's easy because you type what you got to type, close your laptop, walk away. Right?
Keyboard gangsta.
And what people won't really do that as a face-to-face mechanism, right? And so, people are getting a lot more confident behind a screen versus that face-to-face interaction. So we're losing the touch, but we are gaining the power within a computer. So do you think social media, I mean, we use it for positive, giving positive light to our viewers and all of our people that follow us. But could social media, in your opinion, be somewhat dangerous?
It absolutely is dangerous. It's dangerous inherently. It's a platform, right? Anytime you have a platform where you allow two or more people to organize, plan, or do anything, or it has that capability, yeah, it's extremely dangerous. But, planning and conspiring and those type of things aren't the only reasons why social media is dangerous. Obviously, there's a number of other reasons. I mean, which is a whole different other show: children, human trafficking, sexual abuse, the whole nine. There, we have our whole half a year of topics.
I think if you guys want to see that, please let us know in the comment section below. I think it's a great idea, Ramesh, for us to have a separate show in regards to social media. There's many documentaries. There's other underlying problems that I think we should, open up that door and let's have that conversation that people may not know how extreme it is. So I agree with you. That might be a completely different show.
No, and I want to be a part of that one. I think that would be a great discussion. That would be a great discussion to talk about the different platforms and kind of what they mean and what makes one better than the other and their purposes.
Yeah, and if you guys are watching now, want to be a part of that panel, no matter what the age, the gender, or anything like that, I want to welcome it, because the more people and the more that we get some insight from even our youth, as well as those that never really grew up with it, I think that would be very influential. But, staying on topic, we do have, this event that happened and these tragedies and this rioting and this criminal act is leading up to the inauguration of the president-elect Joe Biden. I believe is January 20th. And if I say the date wrong, just...
No, you're right. The inauguration is the 20th, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So now there are mayors out there from Washington, D.C., Maryland governors. They're advising for residents not to attend, to watch it virtually. And look, we definitely showed out this year, 2020, and voting, on having peaceful protests, on virtual stuff. So I do agree with doing it virtually, but there's a potential risk based upon what happened that, they are elevating the security on that day. But if you are able to stay and watch it virtually, I think it would be a great inauguration to watch and something memorable.
It would be, riot concerns aside, there's COVID concerns that should keep people inside as well. So, but that's another show.
That's another show. And look, I agree with you. I want to kind of touch base on that, because a lot of the rioters, if you look at the pictures, not wearing masks.
That's how they got identified, which was awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, neither here nor there, but if they were wearing masks, they wouldn't have so much risk to the other rioters and or peaceful protesters, but also the ones that are in Congress. They put them at risk as well. And, let's not forget, guys, just because we're not talking about COVID, those numbers are pretty high. So please be mindful of that and doing your research. Don't think just because no one's talking about it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Still do your research and still be safe out there. That is something very serious. So now, Ramesh, I know this topic was very important for us to have. I know there's other topics that are going to stem from today's show on later shows that I know you're going to be a part of, because your opinion is very solid and definitely matters to our community. So I want to ask you, if you leave our viewers with one last thing today, what would you tell them in regards to this topic?
Well, I would say first this, that, look, leading up to the inauguration and the days between, and with everything that's come on, I would encourage everyone to just take stock and reflect as to where they are and who they are. Okay. And I say that because I think we have a problem now where all day you have people egging each other on, like another person agrees, and I think if people were to kind of just slow down a little bit on that, I think that would certainly help. And look, I think that I hope everybody really, power of positive thinking, power of prayer. We pray and hope that we have a smooth and peaceful transition. It's really terrible when, you think like 9/11 had this many deaths, right? And we're facing a situation with COVID where it's 9/11 almost every day in terms of deaths. And we've got bigger problems. And I think we should focus on how do we as a nation, we should collectively focus on how do we get back past the pandemic and get back to being normal. And finally, this country was built on the basis of respect and differing opinions. It's why we have different parties. That's why there is open debate. That's why American jurisprudence is designed and the infrastructure is the way it is. Okay, it is. We are a society and a community that is designed to embrace disagreement, but also it allows us a path or an avenue to reach resolutions and compromises. And we all need to have faith in what has made this country amazing and allow our systems to work and not just challenge things and challenge the integrity and challenge the belief systems of people based on innuendo, rumors, false claims.
Yes, no, definitely agree with that. And I want to thank you, Ramesh, for being on the show, and not just that, for you having such a strong voice and, being a part of the conversation, but also being a part of the solution. So I definitely want to thank you for that. I agree with you. I think respect is much needed. It starts in your household. It then trickles to where you go outside your house, whether it's your job, or even your common community and society around. We need to respect each other. We need to also be there for those that are on the line for us in the forefront, for all of those law enforcements that are doing the right thing, for all of those that are protecting us and serving us. So we do support all of those. We support peaceful protests and peaceful freedom of speech. Know your parameters, know your boundaries. I do want to thank you guys for being on today's show, Talk to Me Tuesday. I want to thank you guys for sharing it. The more you share it, the more we're able to educate others, but not just that, make a difference in a positive light for those that are also thinking and experiencing those same things. So I want to thank you for tuning in to Talk to Me Tuesday on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Madi B.
Thanks, guys.